Have you moved out yet? Since my eldest son will be living here, you, the dropout daughter-in-law, should leave." At a party showcasing the renovated in-laws' house, my mother-in-law said this to me with a chuckle. Mother-in-law and the couple, William and his wife, have always looked down on me for being a dropout. It seems they plan to take over the house my husband and I renovated. This might be a good chance to show them that everyone has their limits. My name is Olivia, and I'm a 42-year-old housewife. My husband, Jackson, is 40, making me the older spouse. Both my parents passed away from cancer when I was young. They didn't suffer long. They were hospitalized and passed away shortly after. I grew up moving from one relative's house to another. Growing up, I mistakenly felt the need to leave my relatives' homes as soon as possible. I have 2 younger brothers, and I felt responsible for supporting them. Ignoring my relatives' advice, I dropped out of school and started working. I left my brothers with my relatives and got a job at a company with a dormitory. I began a life of sending financial support to my relatives every month. Now, my brothers have grown up, married, and have their own children. After seeing them settled, I quit my long-time job. Currently, I'm helping out a friend's startup from home. Jackson and I have been married for 12 years. Our child turned 10 this year. Jackson is the younger of 2 siblings, with an older brother named William. When we decided to get married, Jackson optimistically thought we wouldn't have to live with his parents since he's the second son. But as it turned out, William and his wife didn't want to live with the in-laws and moved out early on. So, we ended up living with Jackson's parents, taking care of them. Mother-in-law seems to enjoy picking on her daughters-in-law. I've been shocked by her behavior since our first meeting. I believe William and his wife moved out because of mother-in-law's attitude. The first time I visited the in-laws' house, Emma, William's wife, was treated like a housekeeper by mother-in-law. I remember feeling scared seeing that, and I thought I'd never live with them. Moreover, mother-in-law is oddly obsessed with educational backgrounds. Both her sons graduated from state universities. My father-in-law used to be a college professor, and mother-in-law was a high school teacher before retiring. I married into this highly educated family. When mother-in-law found out I was a dropout, she strongly opposed our marriage. It was a miracle we got married. Even after our wedding, mother-in-law's condescending attitude towards me never changed. William and his wife are also college graduates. From them too, my days of being belittled began. Once we started living together, mother-in-law's harassment began immediately. At first, it was small things. Only my fork was always a disposable one. In the beginning, mother-in-law prepared our meals. She also served the food, but I always got a disposable fork. Even the fork I bought for myself would be thrown away by mother-in-law. When I told her, using disposable forks is wasteful, let's stop, she frowned and said, "After all, I don't like washing a non-family member's fork. The idea of washing someone else's fork every time gives me the creeps." I was taken aback by what my mother-in-law said. Back then, I was younger and had never faced such blatant hostility. I wondered if she saw me as an outsider, hence the disposable fork, but it didn't make sense. She kept emphasizing that I was an outsider since I married into the family. Then, I noticed something. Only the towel I used was washed separately, and it was often washed without detergent. Many times it was left damp, leading to a musty smell. I was the only one using a moldy-smelling towel. Perhaps mother-in-law's eagerness to do the chores was a way to subtly torment me. There were times I came home late from work and found myself locked out. "Sorry, I didn't notice," she'd say with a sly grin. I was sure it was intentional. But there was someone else who added to my distress. Emma, my brother-in-law William's wife, or my sister-in-law. When I first met her, she seemed downtrodden, treated like a housemaid by mother-in-law. But once she was free from mother-in-law's grip, she changed. She teamed up with mother-in-law, the very person who tormented her, to harass me. I remember learning in school not to do unto others what you don't want done to you. Emma seemed to have forgotten that. The two, once at odds, now seemed eerily close. Every day they'd gossip about me, saying things like, "That's why dropouts are like this," right in front of me. I wish they'd at least gossip out of my sight. Emma seemed like a pushover for mother-in-law. She accepted everything mother-in-law said, and never forgot to sing her praises. The way she constantly tried to please mother-in-law left me speechless. Living like this was stressful. I'd occasionally vent to my husband Jackson, but he seemed not to fully understand. He wasn't entirely on mother-in-law's side, but he wasn't entirely on mine either. He lacked decisiveness, but was genuinely kind. I love Jackson. I don't want to cause him any trouble. If enduring this would bring peace, I was willing to bear it. Jackson did understand my efforts. From time to time, he'd secretly buy me my favorite cookies. Emma would often drop by unannounced. I work remotely, so I'm often in my room during the day. And I'm not just lounging around. I'm busy with back-to-back meetings and writing articles. Lately, Emma's favorite pastime seems to be disrupting my remote meetings. She'd walk down the hallway talking loudly, or open my door to mock me. One day she burst in saying, "Stop pretending to work, it's so off-putting." I was in an important meeting, dressed in a suit. She even waved at my boss on the screen. I wished she'd stop. After I managed to get her out, she and mother-in-law gossiped about me in the hallway. During the meeting, I was sweating bullets. It was an experience I never want to remember. Then, out of the blue, something unbelievable happened. We decided to have dinner with William and his wife, and mother-in-law splurged on high-end steak takeout. Even though it's a high-quality steak, I only had the side menu. Of course, I only got the side dishes. Such petty acts had been going on for 12 years. We had recently renovated the house, especially for the elderly father-in-law and mother-in-law. We made it barrier-free and renovated the old bathroom, even adding a small sauna. Both father-in-law and mother-in-law were thrilled, and so was Jackson. Of course, we bore the renovation costs. William and his wife were excited to see the new bathroom and sauna. We also renovated one of our rooms, which they visited. Seeing the screen Jackson installed for movie watching, they looked envious. After the tour, the steak arrived and the dinner began. I had prepared salads, soups, and kids' meals. Since William and his wife didn't have kids, my child was the first grandchild for father-in-law and mother-in-law. As I nibbled on my side dishes and listened to mother-in-law and William's family discuss the renovation, mother-in-law dropped a bombshell. "When are you moving out? William is moving in, so you need to leave." I was so shocked that I couldn't comprehend her words. "Wait, what do you mean?" "I've put up with you for 10 years. Now that the house is nice, it's time for you to go. I want to live with Emma and her family." I was stunned as my mother-in-law spoke with a smug grin, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I looked at William and his wife, thinking it was a joke, but they too had the same nasty smiles. "Hurry up and leave." Something inside me snapped at their mocking tone. Even the usually calm Jackson looked stern. I gave Jackson a look, asking, "Do we not have to put up with this anymore?" Jackson smiled and made a big circle gesture above his head. "So, you want us to leave this house?" I asked. Yes, it's been humiliating having a dropout like you here for 10 years. Mother-in-law sneered. I was appalled. After all, she had run away from her own harassment. With Jackson's approval, I felt I no longer had to endure. "We'll move to a new, beautiful, and spacious house," I declared, smiling at William, his wife, and mother-in-law. Now it was their turn to be taken aback. "Huh?" As they stared in disbelief, I repeated myself. Their expressions showed that they hadn't grasped the situation. "Olivia and I were talking about maybe something like this could happen. You can imagine what William and the others would think," the usually quiet Jackson said in a deep voice. From the start, we knew the renovation was for William and his wife. I had overheard them secretly discussing it with mother-in-law. But suggesting a renovation for an aging house seemed normal. I didn't want to believe there was malice behind it. I hesitated to bother Jackson with this, but I decided to let him in on what was happening. At first, Jackson seemed to think it was a joke. But when he heard someone wanted a sauna, he realized something was up. His father has high blood pressure and was advised against using saunas by his doctor. It turned out William was the one pushing for the sauna. We began to suspect that William and his wife planned to make us renovate the house, only to take it from us later, just like cuckoos taking over another bird's nest. We could have confronted William and his wife, or even my mother-in-law, but seeing Jackson's disappointment broke my heart. I think he wanted to trust William and mother-in-law until the very end. It made me tear up. Why don't we build our own house? I suggested, looking into Jackson's eyes. What do you mean? Build a new, beautiful, spacious house? That sounds too good to be true. The first to react was Emma. She had always dreamed of a new home, but William's gambling habits meant they couldn't save up for one. They were also in debt and always strapped for cash. I believe they moved into Jackson's parents' house because they couldn't keep up with their apartment rent. They probably saw living rent-free in Jackson's parents' house as a step towards their dream home. I suspect they plan to sell the land once Jackson's parents pass away and use the money to buy a new, beautiful, spacious house. Yes, we finally got our new house. You can see it from here. It's the one right across the street. Emma, you've been admiring it, haven't you? I pointed to the newly built house across the road, the one Emma would gaze at dreamily every time she visited. I think it's her dream home. We initially planned to build somewhere farther away, but Jackson chose that plot. He probably wanted to show off our new home to William and his wife, who had plans to take over the renovated house. The plan worked. Emma looked genuinely upset. We're moving to that house. William and his wife can handle the rest. They'll be living here, so they should cover the remaining renovation costs, Jackson said, smiling at William and his wife. But his eyes weren't smiling. It scared me. Once we finished our steaks, Jackson said, "Shall we move?" Our new home had just passed its final inspection the day before. I didn't expect William and his wife to spill the beans so soon, but I'm glad we were ready. Olivia, you're such a failure as a wife. Your ideas are ridiculous and scary. Do you want to burden Jackson with more debt? You're so demanding. Mother-in-law shouted at me, clearly frustrated. She kept repeating demanding wife and dropout, as if she couldn't think of any other insults. It was almost amusing. Mom, apologized to Olivia. What are you talking about? I'm just worried about you. It's sad to see you deceived by such a demanding dropout wife, Mother-in-law replied, reaching out to Jackson. But Jackson coldly brushed her hand away. Mother-in-law, who'd never been rejected by her son before, was in shock. I'd never seen Jackson act this cold before. It's terrible! Deceived by such a demanding wife! Do you plan to ignore me? Jackson's the one burdened with debt. He'll work for this demanding wife for the rest of his life, right? Can't you see that? Mother-in-law cried out, tears streaming down her face. Jackson looked at her with cold eyes and let out a deep sigh. Mom, why don't you get it? Olivia earns more than I do. The land and the house were bought with the money she saved when she was single. I don't have any debt. Why can't you be grateful to Olivia? All eyes turned to me after Jackson's comment. Right after middle school, I started working to financially support my younger siblings who were being raised by our relatives. But those relatives never spent the money I gave them. When I became an adult, they handed it all back to me. At the same time, I also received the life insurance money my parents had left behind. Only when I became an adult did I understand why my relatives had desperately tried to stop me from working right after middle school. It's true. You really should listen to the whole story before jumping to conclusions. Because I never spent money on myself, I grew up not really knowing how to use it. I became a woman whose hobby was saving. When we first got married, I showed Jackson my bank card. He was shocked by the amount. This is what Olivia saved up. I want her to use it on something she truly desires. I was deeply moved by Jackson's words. I decided right then to use it on something Jackson really wanted. Olivia made my dream come true. I can't thank her enough, Jackson said with a smile. I felt a bit embarrassed and looked down. I was so happy to see Jackson pleased, and I felt refreshed seeing the stunned faces of William and Mother-in-law and the frustrated look on Emma's face. Oh, by the way, no one but Dad is allowed in our house. Even if you come, you won't be let in. Jackson declared this to everyone present. Father-in-law jokingly said, Oh, so I can visit, looking pleased. After we left, we could hear Williams shouting and Mother-in-law screaming for a long time. After that, true to Jackson's declaration, William, his wife, and mother-in-law were never allowed in our new home. Father-in-law, however, visited almost daily, happily teaching our child chess. According to father-in-law, there's now constant fighting at the spouse's parents' house. Especially between mother-in-law and Emma, there seemed to be numerous issues. Every day, they shouted at each other, leaving William and father-in-law exasperated. William is now working a side job cleaning at night, burdened with his own debts and the renovation loan. He's losing patience with Emma, who insists on being a housewife. Father-in-law believes it's only a matter of time before they divorce. We've never received apology calls from mother-in-law, but Jackson says there's no need to answer it, so we don't. Our new home is truly wonderful, and we're living comfortably. We even got the border collie puppy our son always wanted. We've set up a small dog run in the yard with artificial turf. Our son is thrilled to have the puppy that mother-in-law wouldn't let him get at her house. Perhaps he had been holding back because of mother-in-law, but in our new home he laughs out loud. Sometimes to drown out the yelling from across the street. We're considering installing soundproofing.